Hello. Yes, you, sitting there, probably scrolling way past bedtime, pretending you're going to watch just 5 more minutes. Relax, you're safe here. Well, safe for now. Tonight's story isn't about knights in shining armor or marble palaces where emperors stroll around sipping wine like Instagram influencers. Forget all that Hollywood nonsense. This is about reality. The itchy, smelly, uncomfortable kind of reality. The Roman Empire. Now, before we dive into this little time machine, do me a favor. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Pretend you're doing it for the glory of Rome. Or for me, whichever excuse helps you sleep better. Good. Now, lights off. Sink into your pillow. Pull that blanket just right, as if it's going to protect you from the chaos of ancient history. Take a breath. And another. And here comes the twist. Congratulations, you just woke up in the Roman Empire. The year is somewhere between when sandals were the height of fashion and indoor plumbing was both genius and disgusting at the same time. You're lying on a bed that isn't really a bed, more like a wooden frame with ropes pretending to be soft, and a mattress stuffed with straw that smells faintly of sweat, goat, and disappointment. And this is only the beginning. Morning. Well, morning if you can call it that. There's no alarm clock chirping from your phone, no gentle playlist you've chosen to trick yourself into believing you're a morning person. No, in Rome, the day wakes you up rudely. You're pulled from your fragile sleep by noises that sound like construction work, except there's no construction company, no safety helmets, just carts with iron wheels screeching against stone, echoing through narrow streets that funnel sound straight into your fragile, sleep-deprived skull. The smell joins in before you even open your eyes. Forget the idea of crisp air or a scented candle making your room feel like a spa. You're breathing in a cocktail of smoke from cheap oil lamps, sweat from people who think bathing once a week is ambitious, and something that is either yesterday's fish guts or a distant relative of yesterday's fish guts. It's pungent, sour, unforgettable. You move, or rather, you attempt to. The bed groans beneath you. Calling it a bed is generous. It's a wooden frame tied with ropes that sag just enough to convince your back it's been betrayed. On top, a mattress stuffed with straw and maybe, if you're lucky, feathers. Mostly straw, though. Which means when you shift, little stalks poke through the fabric and jab you like tiny needles, reminding you that comfort is a modern scam. You scratch your arm. You're not sure if it's from the straw, the rough wool blanket, or the fleas that definitely live here rent-free. Fleas love Rome. They thrive here. You, on the other hand, less so. You try to sit up, but immediately regret it. The air is cold, and not the refreshing kind that wakes you gently. It's the type that slaps you in the face, seeps into your bones, and makes you question why you didn't just stay in bed forever. But you can't, because in Rome, lying in bed means laziness, and laziness is dangerous. People notice, and when people notice, they talk. And when they talk, somehow someone important hears, and suddenly your reputation is a sinking ship. So you get up, or rather, you clumsily untangle yourself from the blanket, if it deserves that name. It's wool, rough, scratchy, the exact opposite of comfort. Imagine wrapping yourself in the world's most determined sandpaper. That's your blanket. Your feet touch the floor. Cold, hard, uneven stone. Forget slippers, forget socks with little cartoon animals. Your toes meet reality, and reality feels like punishment. You shuffle forward, wishing for coffee. But Rome has no coffee. The concept doesn't even exist yet. Instead, if you're lucky, there's bread. Stale bread, yesterday's bread, and maybe some olives that taste like someone dared them to be food. But before that feast, hygiene, or the Roman version of it. You look for your bathroom, but it's not a private space. It's a public latrine, which is basically a row of stone seats with holes, no stalls, no privacy, just you, your neighbors, and the symphony of digestive systems echoing in one communal chamber.
Toilet paper? Please. You get a sponge on a stick, shared with everyone. Yes, shared. They rinse it in water and vinegar between uses. Does that comfort you? Probably not. You splash cold water on your face. No soap, unless you're wealthy, and even then it's a rough block that feels like gravel. For most, a quick rinse has to do. You rub your eyes, trying to wake up, but really you're just spreading more grime around. Congratulations, you're officially clean by Roman standards, which means still dirty by modern ones. Breakfast is next. Except breakfast isn't the grand feast you've been conditioned to expect from brunch menus and Instagram photos. It's bread, always bread, sometimes dipped in wine. Yes, wine for breakfast. Not the celebratory mimosas with the girls kind of wine, but the watered-down, sour version that tastes vaguely of vinegar. It's supposed to be nutritious. It's not. You chew slowly, because chewing quickly would mean finishing sooner. And finishing sooner would mean you're still hungry. The bread is so dry it scrapes the roof of your mouth, leaving tiny scratches. Each swallow is a negotiation with your throat, a pact you wish you could back out of. And yet, this is survival. This is fuel. This is Rome. While you eat, you hear more sounds outside. Merchants shouting, carts rattling, children running, dogs barking, and somewhere a man yelling in Latin that you can't quite translate, but you're sure it's either an insult or a sale. Probably both. The city is alive, too alive, and you're stuck in it. You glance at your clothes. Tunic, just a tunic. One piece of wool, scratchy like everything else, dyed a dull color because bright ones are expensive. Shoes, if you're fortunate, are leather sandals that cut into your feet. If not, it's barefoot life for you. Either way, comfort remains a rumor. And so the day begins. The sun hasn't even climbed high yet, and already you miss your old life. The coffee, the shower, the privacy, the silence. You'll never complain about Wi-Fi speed again. Rome has many things: glory, power, roads, aqueducts. But comfort? That didn't make the cut.
Work, that inevitable invention. You wake, rub your eyes, and Rome doesn't care. The city already hums with the rhythm of carts, shouting merchants, and someone loudly debating whether figs are worth the price of yesterday. No one asks what you dream of doing. Your job is decided by birth, luck, or whoever owns your body at the moment. Passion? That word hasn't been invented yet. If you're poor, the market is waiting for your back. The baker's oven roars, and the air is thick with smoke, flour, and sweat. Men knead dough until their arms look like sculpted marble, except without the art gallery. The donkey trudges in a circle, grinding grain with the resignation of a creature who has understood life too well. You watch, try to help, and end up covered in a paste of flour and regret. Step outside, and the fuller's shop assaults your nose. Laundry here means urine in vats, stomped by human feet. The smell is so aggressive you briefly reconsider the concept of clothing. Yet wealthy Romans still line up, demanding brighter whites, because fashion is apparently worth gagging for. The Forum is a carnival of chaos. Fishmongers shouting over olive sellers, scribes scribbling, and a man waving jars of garum, the infamous fish sauce, like it's liquid gold. You can almost taste the stench before it reaches you. A boy dreams of being a charioteer, his mother laughs, and you keep walking because hope is contagious, and you're low on immunity. If you're a soldier, your work is less market, more torture by discipline. Marching, drilling, lifting shields until your arms curse you in Latin. The centurion's voice is a whip disguised as language. You dream of coffee, get instead a mouthful of dust and orders. By noon, hunger arrives again. The popina serves lentil stew, bread, and wine watered down until it tastes like disappointment diluted. You chew slowly, as if speed would somehow make the food vanish before your stomach notices. Around you, arguments about politics explode like fireworks, loud, bright, pointless. Work in Rome isn't about self-fulfillment. It's survival. It's blisters in sandals, splinters in palms, and dust in your teeth. The city doesn't care what you want. It only cares that you keep moving. And you do because the alternative is worse.
Home, or what passes for it in Rome. Forget cozy apartments with central heating, scented candles, or even walls that do their one job of keeping the outside world outside. Your insula, the grand Roman term for what is essentially a vertical fire hazard, leans with the confidence of a drunk gladiator. From the street, it almost looks majestic. Several stories stacked like ambitious Jenga blocks. Inside, though, you discover cracks spidering across the plaster, beams that groan like old men, and stairs so uneven you suspect they were designed by someone who hated ankles. Your room? Calling it an apartment would be offensive to apartments. It's a single space where living, eating, and regretting your life choices all happen in close collaboration. The bed is straw, pretending to be soft, bound in a sackcloth cover that leaks stalks sharp enough to jab your ribs in the night. The blanket is wool, coarse enough to file down your patience. When it scratches, you try to convince yourself it's exfoliation. The pillow, let's be generous, feels like a sack of potatoes that lost their will to live. You turn it over, hoping for relief, but both sides are equally disappointing. Silence does not live here. Above you, neighbors stomp with the authority of centurions. Beside you, a baby auditions daily for the role of world's loudest alarm clock. Outside in the courtyard, pigeons hold their eternal Senate meetings, cooing and flapping like they're legislating the very concept of crumbs. Privacy? That's a modern fantasy. In Rome, your secrets belong to the building, and the building gossips more than any neighbor. You light your oil lamp, and the flame sputters with all the enthusiasm of a bureaucrat. It gives off more smoke than light, leaving a smell of burnt olive oil clinging to your clothes. Shadows climb the walls, jagged and restless, like they're trying to escape the room along with you. You cough, wave the smoke away, and remind yourself that electricity is a luxury you won't see for another couple thousand years. Clothing is no better. Your tunic is one piece of wool fabric, rough as sandpaper and equally forgiving. It doesn't care if you're hot or cold. It's uncomfortable in all climates. In summer, it traps sweat until you smell like you've been marinating in despair. In winter, it welcomes drafts with the enthusiasm of an open door. You own one, maybe two of these. Laundry? Oh yes, the Fullers. They scrub your clothes with urine collected from public jars set out for citizens to fill. You pay them, they stomp, rinse, scrape, and return your tunic smelling like ammonia and desperation. You put it back on and thank the gods it's cleaner, though not in any sense your modern nose would respect. Sandals? Leather straps that cut into your skin, leaving blisters that never quite heal. You oil them, patch them, beg them to last, but eventually the straps stretch and snap, and you're left barefoot on streets coated in a mystery mixture of mud, waste, and whatever yesterday's fishmonger dumped. A nice pair of linen clothes might save your skin, but linen is expensive. Owning linen is like owning bragging rights. Most Romans look at it the way you might look at a luxury car. Beautiful, but not for you. Now let's talk hygiene, that word Rome treats with selective enthusiasm. The bathhouse is the one place where Romans shine. If you can afford the entry, you walk into a temple of steam and stone. First the warm room, coaxing sweat from your skin. Then the hot room, where the air feels like being hugged by fire. Then the cold plunge, a liquid slap in the face that reminds you you're still alive. Oil replaces soap. You smear it on your body, then scrape it off with a curved tool called a strigil, removing dirt, sweat, and any dignity you had left. The result? You're cleaner, lighter, maybe even smug. But the bathhouse is also the empire's favorite gossip hub. Men and women, separately of course, trade rumors with the same energy they trade insults at the chariot races. You leave the baths refreshed, but also knowing more than you wanted about your neighbor's love life and your patron's financial problems. If the bath is too expensive, you make do with splashing cold water from a fountain. There, children splash each other, dogs lap directly from the basin, and you try to wash your armpits while pretending not to mind the stairs. No soap, no privacy, just brisk rinses that trick you into feeling civilized. You comb your hair with wood or bone, pick out the lice if you can, and pray no one stands too close on a hot day. Health, of course, is fragile. You wake up with a cough, and half the building coughs with you. Cuts on your feet get infected quickly. Remember, the streets are basically open petri dishes. A healer might prescribe herbs or suggest balancing your humors by bleeding you. Yes, bleeding. The logic is, if you're sick, you clearly have too much blood. They'll gladly remove some. If you survive, congratulations, the treatment worked. If not, well, you weren't meant for this world. Toothaches? Forget dentists. Someone will yank that molar out with pliers that look like they were designed for carpentry, not human mouths. The anesthesia is wine. Cheap wine, if you're unlucky. One good pull, a scream, and congratulations! You're cured! Until the next tooth decides to declare war. Eyes suffer too. Smoke, dust, and bad lighting leave them irritated. Ointments exist, but you're just as likely to end up smearing honey or crushed herbs across your eyelids. If you can still see afterward, it's considered a success. And then the great invisible enemy, disease. Plagues sweep through neighborhoods without warning. One day the streets are buzzing, the next shutters are closed, and the silence is thick. Friends vanish with polite euphemisms, "He's not here anymore." Families burn clothes, light incense, pray to every god they know, but nothing stops the spread. Rome is a city of millions, packed tight, sharing water, sharing food, sharing fleas and rats. Germ theory won't exist for centuries, so you blame the gods, the stars, or foreigners. It's easier than admitting you don't know. Yet comfort does exist, in fleeting moments. You bite into a ripe fig, juice running down your chin, and for a second life feels generous. A neighbor shares watered wine with you, and you laugh at nothing until it feels like everything. The winter sun slips through your tiny window and warms your face, and you close your eyes, pretending you're somewhere else. A stray dog chooses you as their resting spot, their warm body pressed against your leg. You don't own much, but at least you're chosen. Rome doesn't offer luxury. It offers survival, and sometimes, if the gods are kind, a taste of sweetness between the noise and the grit. You lower your standards until survival itself feels like a blessing. And you tell yourself, as you lie back on that straw bed, scratching at your wool blanket, that maybe tomorrow will be easier. Of course, it won't. But in Rome, hope is the cheapest medicine, and everyone doses themselves daily.
Leisure in Rome is not about relaxation. It's about distraction. The empire is brilliant at giving its people reasons not to think too hard about bread prices, taxes, or the fact that their apartment might collapse while they're sleeping. You want entertainment? Rome doesn't just provide it, it smashes it into your face with trumpets, drums, and a lot of shouting. Let's start with the Circus Maximus, Rome's beloved racetrack. Imagine a stadium so enormous it makes modern football arenas look like kiddie playgrounds. 200,000 people can squeeze in, shoulder to shoulder, screaming as if their voices were weapons. Chariot racing is the obsession. Teams are divided into colors, reds, blues, greens, whites, and fans are more loyal to their color than to their families. People gamble on the races with the same desperation you might reserve for payday loans. You hear the horses before you see them, hooves pounding, wheels rattling, the drivers leaning forward, whips cracking in the air. Dust clouds rise and sting your eyes. One crash sends a chariot splintering into fragments, horses stumbling, the crowd roaring with savage delight. Safety? No seatbelts, no helmets, just raw chaos. You cheer too, because the noise is a tide and you get carried along whether you want to or not. If speed and dust aren't your style, there's always the amphitheater, the Colosseum, the empire's marble monument to spectacle. From outside, it's impressive, towering with arches that promise grandeur. From inside, it's blood and sweat disguised as entertainment. Gladiators fight, not just men, but sometimes wild beasts dragged in from Africa. Lions, leopards, elephants, even rhinos. The air stinks of animals, iron, and anticipation. You watch two fighters circle, their muscles gleaming with oil, weapons flashing. The crowd roars at every strike, demanding violence like it's a meal. Sometimes the emperor raises his hand, deciding with a gesture whether a defeated man lives or dies. You shiver, because the power of life and death resting on a whim is terrifying. Yet you cheer anyway, because silence here feels dangerous. Of course, not all leisure is violent. There are theaters where actors declaim tragedies in booming voices, or comedians deliver jokes so crude they'd make a modern stand-up blush. The acoustics are incredible. Every laugh, every cough, every sneeze bounces around the stone seating like a gossip that refuses to die. Plays mix poetry with slapstick, and you sit there, trying to follow the Latin, realizing that humor doesn't age well, but laughter is contagious anyway. Religion, too, is a performance, but with more incense. Temples rise across the city, each one dedicated to a different god. Jupiter thunders from his marble throne. Venus smiles down at lovers and liars alike. Mars listens to every soldier's whispered promises before battle. You don't pick one god, you scatter prayers like bribes, hoping at least one sticks. The rituals are endless. Sacrifices of animals, pouring wine on altars, tying ribbons to sacred trees. The smell of burning fat mixes with perfume and smoke, lingering on your clothes long after the ritual ends. Superstition follows you everywhere. You step carefully to avoid the wrong omens. A black dog crossing your path makes you pause. An unexpected sneeze before a journey makes you reconsider. You carry amulets, tiny phallic charms, little bronze figurines, strings of beads, because everyone knows the gods might be busy, but amulets work overtime. Even graffiti on walls has magical scribbles, curses aimed at rivals, invocations begging for love, or just rude jokes about neighbors. The divine is everywhere, in the sky, in your bread, in the itch you can't scratch. Social life is another kind of theater. Dinner parties for the rich are spectacles of excess. Reclining on couches, guests are served course after course. Oysters, roasted meats, exotic fruits, honey cakes. Slaves dart about, pouring wine so diluted it barely counts as alcohol. The host shows off his wealth with silver plates and rare spices. And the conversation is equal parts philosophy and petty gossip. You, invited once as a novelty, try to eat gracefully while balancing sideways on a couch and wondering if sleeping over is counted as an insult to the gods. For the poor, leisure is more humble, but no less alive. Taverns spill laughter and arguments into the streets. Men huddle around cups of sour wine, dice clattering across wooden tables. A fight breaks out, chairs topple, then everything settles again with laughter. Someone sings badly, someone else claps, and for a moment, the tavern is warmer than any temple. Children play in alleys, kicking balls made of rags, chasing each other between carts. Women gather at fountains, gossiping as they draw water, trading stories that sound like epics when told with enough hand gestures. Festivals are the city's way of exploding into chaos. Saturnalia, the most famous, turns the world upside down. Masters serve slaves, rules vanish, gifts are exchanged, and everyone drinks until the streets themselves stagger. You wander through garlands of greenery, songs, and shouts, marveling at how quickly order dissolves into joyful disorder. For 1 week, the empire laughs at itself and then, of course, returns to normal hierarchy with a hangover. You notice that Rome doesn't separate leisure from religion or politics or gossip. Everything overlaps. The amphitheater is about entertainment, yes, but also about reminding people of imperial power. Temples are for worship, but also for networking. Taverns are for wine, but also for plotting.
Even a walk to the bathhouse can turn into a philosophical debate, an arranged marriage, or a fight over olives. Leisure fear isn't downtime. It's a different stage for the same endless play. And you float along, swept up by it all. You cheer at races, wince at gladiators, laugh at bad jokes, sip bad wine, and murmur prayers to gods you're not sure are listening. In modern life, leisure is about escape. In Rome, it's about belonging. You participate because everyone does, because to refuse is suspicious, because silence in a crowd of 200,000 is louder than any cheer. By nightfall, your head is buzzing with voices, laughter, songs, prayers, curses, gossip, and the faint ring of iron striking shield. You lie on your straw bed, ears still echoing with the city's joy and madness. Leisure didn't rest you, it exhausted you. And yet, you fall asleep smiling, because in Rome, even exhaustion feels like a kind of victory.
Rome does not hide its violence. It parades it down the street, wraps it in marble, and calls it civilization. You thought you knew cruelty from watching modern crime dramas or reading sensational headlines? No. In Rome, violence is not an exception, it is a tool, a form of communication, an art form performed daily. Walk through the Forum and you see justice on display, though justice here has very little to do with fairness. Thieves, rebels, or anyone unlucky enough to offend the wrong man end up tied to posts in public. Whipping is common, the lash snapping against skin like punctuation marks in a sentence of pain. People gather to watch, not out of cruelty, well, maybe a little, but because this is what passes for both news and entertainment. You wince at the sound, but the crowd nods approvingly. This is discipline, they say. This is Rome keeping order. If the crime is worse, the punishment grows theatrical. Crucifixion, the empire's favorite warning sign, decorates roadsides. You walk past wooden crosses, bodies sagging under their own weight, birds circling overhead. The smell is unforgettable. Sweat, blood, and decay mixing into a perfume that lingers in your nose long after you've gone. It's not just execution. It's a billboard, a reminder to everyone. Rome forgives debts more easily than it forgives disobedience. Soldiers know violence differently. Discipline in the legions is legendary. Fall asleep on duty, and you're beaten by your comrades. Disobey, and you face decimation. 1 man in 10, chosen by lot, executed by the others. Imagine standing in line with 9 other men, praying to every god you know that the lot falls elsewhere. You think modern jobs are stressful? Try going to work every day knowing your coworkers might literally beat you to death if your group underperforms. The games, of course, make violence glamorous. You return to the amphitheater, the Colosseum's sand stained darker with each contest. Gladiators fight not only for survival, but for fame. The crowd chants names, waving hands in rhythm, demanding blood. A wounded man kneels, raising a finger in appeal. The emperor or sponsor gestures, thumbs up or down, though historians will argue forever which meant mercy. The decision is quick, the crowd's appetite quicker. The blade falls, the body slumps, and 20,000 throats cheer as though they've just seen art. You cheer too, unwilling, caught in the tidal wave of noise, realizing how easily humans can turn cruelty into spectacle. Executions aren't always reserved for criminals. Political enemies suffer too, usually with flair. Poison in wine, a dagger in the bath, exile to some barren island where survival itself is punishment. Senators accused of treason often choose suicide, slipping into a warm bath and opening their veins. It sounds poetic until you imagine the reality. Steam, silence, and a man slowly fading while slaves wait to clean up the mess. Rome calls it dignity. You call it terrifying. Daily violence is casual too. Fights in taverns, brawls in markets,
knives flashing between insults. The law tolerates more than you'd expect, so long as the right people aren't harmed. Blood washes off stone quickly, and life continues as if nothing happened. You see men shouting over dice. One pulls a blade, the other collapses, and the crowd barely pauses. Death is not shocking here, it's background noise. Slaves, the invisible foundation of the empire, endure violence as routine. A missed task, a broken jug, an attitude mistaken for defiance, all can bring a whip across the back. Some households are kinder, some harsher, but the power imbalance is absolute. You overhear stories of revolts crushed with merciless efficiency, thousands crucified along roads to remind the survivors that hope is dangerous. Every lash, every chain, every punishment is a message. Stay in line, or Rome will show you its teeth. Even in the military arena, war itself is violence industrialized. You hear soldiers bragging of campaigns in Gaul, Britain, or the East, describing battles in tones that mix pride with horror. Villages burned, fields salted, captives sold by the thousands. Triumphs marched through Rome with golden spoils, exotic animals, and chained prisoners paraded for the crowd. People cheer the victory, ignoring the misery behind it. Rome is addicted to conquest, and conquest is written in wounds. Religious violence has its stage as well. Sacrifices of animals are common: bleating goats, lowing cattle, even the occasional pig. The priests slit throats neatly, letting blood splash into bowls, examining entrails for omens. You stand there watching smoke rise, realizing the gods apparently love barbecue. But sometimes religion demands human punishment too. Foreign cults are suppressed, suspicious rituals banned, worshippers executed for treason disguised as devotion. Rome tolerates many gods, but only if those gods don't compete with its authority. Panic spreads fastest when fear of crime or rebellion rises. Rumors of arson or poison rings make neighbors turn on each other. Accusations fly, and punishment follows quickly, often without proof. Fires are a constant fear. Entire districts have burned in hours. Afterwards, blame needs a face, and someone unlucky becomes that face. They're executed, the city breathes easier, and nothing is really solved. You see the cycle, and it chills you more than the punishments themselves. What shocks you most is how normalized it all feels. People gossip about executions the way you gossip about a new movie. Children play games imitating gladiators, swinging sticks like swords, collapsing dramatically in the dirt. Mothers scold them for ruining their tunics, not for pretending to kill each other. Violence here isn't just spectacle. It's woven into childhood, adulthood, citizenship. To live in Rome is to accept it. And yet, there's always theater in the cruelty. Punishments are staged in public squares, floggings timed for maximum audience, executions scheduled like festivals. Rome understands that fear works better when shared. Private punishments don't make obedient citizens. Public pain does. You find yourself watching even when you don't want to, because turning away feels dangerous, like refusing to participate in the empire's great performance. At night, you return home, ears still ringing from the crowd's cheers, nose still filled with the metallic tang of blood. You lie on your straw bed, eyes wide, replaying what you've seen. You try to remind yourself this is history, this is a different world. But then you remember, for them, this is daily life. For them, you're the strange one, the outsider who thinks violence should be hidden, quiet, exceptional. Here, it is everything but. You close your eyes, and the echoes of Rome's cruelty march with you into uneasy sleep.
Evening in Rome doesn't arrive quietly. It crawls in with the persistence of a merchant and the drama of a senator. The sun dips behind tiled rooftops, staining the sky in orange and purple streaks, and the whole city exhales like a beast settling its weight for the night. But don't imagine soft lamplight and peaceful silence.
Rome at dusk is restless, unpredictable, alive in ways that make your modern bedtime routine look laughably tame. First comes the smell. All day long, fires have been burning, forges hammering out iron, bakers coaxing loaves, cooks simmering stews, lamps smoking in cramped rooms. By evening, the smoke hangs heavy, mingling with the sharper stench of garbage tossed into alleys, the tang of urine from chamber pots emptied into the street, and the ripe perfume of animals herded home. Add the fishmonger's leftovers baking in the last bit of sunlight, and the result is a symphony of odors that you taste on your tongue whether you want to or not. The streets themselves change personality. By day, they're crowded with carts and shouting merchants, but as night falls, the carts retreat and shadows claim the cobbles. Oil lamps flicker in doorways, small flames licking the darkness. They don't provide light so much as little islands of hesitation, reminders that beyond the glow is a city that prefers to keep its secrets hidden. You step carefully now. Potholes wait like traps, stray dogs slink low, and rats scamper bold as citizens. Evening is mealtime, and food is both comfort and performance. In wealthy homes, dinner parties stretch into spectacles. Reclining guests are served multiple courses, eggs sprinkled with herbs, roasted meat swimming in sauces, figs drizzled with honey, and wine flowing endlessly, watered just enough to keep people from passing out too early. Conversation is sharp, half philosophy, half gossip, and every story is told louder than the last. Slaves move constantly, filling cups, carrying trays, fanning away flies, trying to stay invisible while being essential. If you're lucky enough to be a guest, you smile until your cheeks ache, pretending you belong while silently counting how many olives you can sneak without judgment. For the poor, dinner is humbler, but no less important. A pot of lentils or barley stew bubbles on a hearth, flavored with whatever scraps the day allowed. Onions, garlic, a little meat if fortune smiled, but more often cabbage. Bread anchors the meal, torn and dipped, filling the gaps hunger leaves behind. Families gather around, bowls in hand, talking over each other, laughter mixing with complaints about landlords, prices, or neighbors. It's loud, it's messy, it's survival disguised as ritual. And when the jug of wine is passed around, watered thin but still enough to warm the chest, the day's fatigue softens just a little. Street food thrives at dusk too. Vendors shout from corners, offering sausages sizzling on small grills, chickpea pancakes hot from the pan, nuts roasted until their smell drifts down the block. You hand over a coin and walk away chewing, grease on your fingers, crumbs in your beard, feeling briefly like Rome invented fast food centuries before anyone else. It's not glamorous, but it's hot, it's filling, and it's yours. Entertainment doesn't stop just because the sun clocked out. Taverns burst alive, their doors wide open, spilling wine, dice, songs, and arguments into the street. Inside, benches are crowded, cups clink, and laughter competes with shouting. Someone tells a story about a neighbor's failed love affair, another brags about a horse race bet, and soon half the room is yelling, while the other half is dancing badly to a flute that squeaks more than it sings. A fight breaks out, a table tips over, wine splashes on the floor, and everyone cheers before returning to drinking. You sit in the corner, half amused, half wary, because here, peace is always temporary. The theater offers another option. Torches illuminate the stage, actors declaiming verses under masks that hide more than they reveal. Comedies filled with slapstick make the crowd howl, while tragedies wring sighs and tears from those who haven't already had too much wine. The acoustics carry every word, every cough, every laugh, so even in the back row, you're part of the story. You clap along, swept up not by the brilliance of the play, but by the sheer energy of hundreds of people reacting together. Religion doesn't sleep either. Temples glow with lamplight, priests mutter incantations, and worshippers offer late prayers. Incense thickens the air, and you catch glimpses of people kneeling, tying ribbons to altars, whispering pleas for health,
fortune or mercy. Some carry small figurines of gods, rubbing them for luck as they head home. The divine feels closer at night, when shadows press and the future seems even less certain. You can't help but offer a muttered prayer yourself, just in case. But night also belongs to danger. Rome doesn't have a police force the way you imagine it. Watchmen patrol with torches, but they're few and far between and more interested in bribes than justice. Bandits, drunks, and opportunists own the alleys. You clutch your coin pouch tighter, walk faster, and hope your sandals don't betray you with a squeak too loud. You see a man dragged into the shadows, hear the muffled struggle, and keep moving because stopping would make you a participant. Rome teaches you quickly. Survival means minding your own business after dark. In the wealthier districts, the night is softer. Gardens are lit with lanterns, fountains trickle, and guests recline under grapevine trellises, sipping wine as musicians pluck strings. Here, laughter is subdued, refined, and the conversations glide smoothly over politics, poetry, or trade deals. You catch a whiff of roses carried on the evening breeze and almost forget the filth of the streets beyond the villa walls. Almost. Because the moment you leave, the reality of Rome rushes back in like cold water. Inside your insula, the building creaks as tenants settle in. Babies cry, couples argue in whispers that travel too well through thin walls. Someone upstairs drops a jug and curses creatively. You light your small lamp, shield the flame from drafts, and sit on the edge of your bed. The day's exhaustion presses into your bones, but sleep won't come easily. Not with the noise, not with the straw poking through the mattress, not with the memory of shadows that linger outside. Still, there are comforts. A jug of wine shared with a neighbor, laughter over some ridiculous story, the warmth of bodies gathered close. You lie down, pulling the scratchy wool blanket over your shoulders, listening as the city slowly hums itself to sleep. Dogs bark, carts rumble one last time, pigeons coo their bureaucratic minutes, and then at last, the night holds steady. You close your eyes not because Rome has grown quiet, but because you've grown too tired to care. Tomorrow will wake you with cartwheels and shouts, but for now the city wraps you in smoke, noise, and restless streams. Evening here is not peace. It's transition. And you, caught between exhaustion and fear, drift into sleep knowing Rome never really sleeps at all. Morning and evening may bookend the day, but it's the little in-between moments that truly define Roman life. The background noise, the social glue, the endless chatter that somehow keeps the empire running. You thought history was about emperors, battles, and marble monuments? Wrong. Rome is really about waiting in line, hearing your neighbor's gossip whether you want to or not, and trying not to step in something best left unnamed. The fountain, for instance. The aqueducts feed water into grand basins scattered across the city, and everyone comes to fetch their daily share. It should be simple. Dip your jug, head home. But no. The fountain is Rome's unofficial parliament. Housewives exchange the latest news. Whose son is courting whose daughter? Which baker is watering down his flour? Which senator was spotted with which mistress? The arguments start small. You cut in line and escalate quickly to dramatic finger-wagging, shouting, and sometimes even a shove. Children splash each other until a matron scolds them with a voice sharper than a centurion's order. Dogs sneak drinks, cats prowl for scraps, and you, standing there holding a clay jug, realize you've just wasted half an hour listening to other people's business. But this is Rome. The fountain is as much about water as it is about society. Markets are another theater. Vendors shout louder than each other, claiming their figs are sweeter, their olives fatter, their wine less likely to blind you. You weave through stalls, assaulted by smells, smoked fish that could knock out a horse, honey dripping in golden streams, spices that make your nose twitch. A butcher slaps meat on the table, flies claim it immediately, and he waves them off with the tired air of a man who lost that battle years ago. You haggle over a handful of onions, pretending to be clever, while
while knowing the seller already calculated how much you'd pay the moment you walked up. You leave with less coin and more food than you can comfortably carry, which means you've won. Or lost. In Rome, it's the same thing. Social hierarchy bleeds into everything. You notice it when you walk the streets. Senators in fine togas swish past, slaves carrying baskets trailing behind. Freedmen puff themselves up with new status, trying to stand taller than those who still belong to someone. Children of the wealthy strut in miniature versions of adult clothes, already learning to look down on people twice their age. You stand somewhere in the middle, trying to look invisible. Rome is obsessed with status. Who you know, what you wear, where you sit at dinner, it all matters. And if you get it wrong, people notice. Oh, they notice. Friendship, too, comes with strings. Romans don't really hang out, they build networks. A morning visit to your patron means nodding along to his boring stories in exchange for the occasional coin or job recommendation. Your loyalty is currency, and you spend it carefully. If you fail to show up or flatter the wrong person, you risk exile from the circle that feeds you. Social climbing isn't just a metaphor here, it's survival. And every smile has an agenda tucked neatly behind it. Still, there is joy. A group of children plays in the dust, rolling hoops, chasing balls made of rags, pretending to be gladiators until one falls dramatically and refuses to get up until the others cheer. Old men sit on steps playing board games, scratched into the stone, moving pieces slowly, arguing about rules more than the actual game. Women weave together, fingers quick, gossip quicker. A man stands on a corner telling stories, gathering a crowd with tales of gods, heroes, and disasters, embellishing until even he can't remember what part was true. You stand there laughing, realizing half the audience knows he's lying and doesn't care. Entertainment is cheap when you accept exaggeration as a civic duty. Religion slips into daily life with ease. You don't plan to pray, but you still toss a coin at a shrine when you pass, whispering a hope that your neighbor's cough isn't contagious. Household gods, the Lares, sit in little shrines in every home, watching over families like silent landlords. Each morning you greet them, offering a crumb of bread or a splash of wine. Ignore them and you risk bad luck, or at least the feeling of bad luck, which is just as heavy. You've never been this superstitious before, but Rome does that to you. The world is unpredictable, so you grab at any thread of control, even if it's tied to a clay figurine staring blankly from a shelf. Meals are social glue too. Even a simple supper of bread and stew becomes an event. Neighbors squeeze into each other's cramped rooms, bowls in hand, passing jugs of watered wine. Stories flow as fast as the drink, complaints about landlords, jokes about politicians, exaggerated tales of minor victories at work. Someone sings badly but enthusiastically. Someone else claps along. For a brief moment, the walls don't feel thin and the world feels wide. You look around at faces lit by lamplight, lined with fatigue but bright with laughter, and you realize survival here is not just about food, it's about company. Of course, the city never lets you forget its darker humor. You trip on uneven cobbles and curse, only to notice a man nearby doing the same, muttering his own curses in Latin. A mule dumps manure in front of you right as you try to look dignified. A rat darts across your path carrying something suspiciously like bread. Rome constantly reminds you that dignity is optional. Irony is mandatory. You walk home past graffiti scrawled on walls, love notes, political insults, crude jokes about local officials. Some are clever, some childish, all very Roman. You chuckle, realizing ancient graffiti isn't that different from modern social media, loud, opinionated, and occasionally spelling challenged. A drawing of a gladiator with exaggerated muscles makes you snort. People thousands of years ago were just as silly as people today. That realization, oddly, comforts you. As the night deepens, you sit by your small lamp replaying the day. Not the big events, the emperor's decrees, the gladiators' battles, but the little moments, the laugh at the fountain, the taste of roasted nuts from a vendor, the way your neighbor rolled her eyes when her husband bragged about catching a fish this big. These details, mundane and ridiculous,
are the empire. Rome may love its marble monuments, but it's built on gossip, jokes, shared meals, and small comforts snatched between chaos. And you? You're learning to belong. Not perfectly. You'll never quite master the art of eating lying down, and your Latin accent still makes people smirk. But enough. Enough to laugh when they laugh, enough to pray when they pray, enough to feel for a fleeting second like you're not just surviving here, you're living.
Food in Rome is both a necessity and a performance. You might imagine tables groaning under platters of roasted boar, amphoras of fine wine, servants gliding around with silver trays. And yes, sometimes that happens. If you're rich, powerful, or lucky enough to be invited to someone else's display of wealth. For the rest of the city, though, food is simpler, rougher, and occasionally questionable. Start with bread. Always bread. Rome runs on it. The grain ships pour into the harbor at Ostia, the lifeline of the city. Miss a shipment, and panic spreads faster than fire. Bread is handed out to the people as part of the famous bread and circuses policy, because nothing keeps a population quieter than a full stomach and a good distraction. You line up, shuffle forward with the crowd, and collect your ration. It's not soft, fluffy bakery bread. It's dense, dark, and sometimes gritty with stones that slip through the mill. You chew carefully because breaking a tooth is one accident away from financial ruin. And yet, when hunger gnaws, this bread feels like treasure. Vegetables fill most tables. Cabbage, onions, beans, lentils. Simple, hearty foods that can be stretched to feed a family. Garlic is everywhere, its smell clinging to breath, clothes, and walls. Meat is rare for the poor, more likely a treat than a daily occurrence. When you do get meat, it's often cheap cuts, stringy and tough, boiled into stews to make it edible. Fish appears frequently, though freshness is a gamble, especially inland. One whiff tells you if you've been lucky, or if you'll spend the night regretting your purchase. Now, sauces. Romans adore them, especially garum, the fermented fish sauce that seems to appear in every recipe. It's made by layering fish guts, salt, and herbs in a jar and leaving it in the sun until it liquefies into something halfway between seasoning and punishment. To modern tastes, it's horrific. To Romans, it's life itself. A dash of garum turns bland porridge into something resembling flavor. You wrinkle your nose as the sharp, salty tang clings to your tongue, but everyone around you smacks their lips happily. Rome apparently is addicted to umami centuries before the word exists. Wine is another constant, but don't imagine smooth vintages aged in oak barrels. Roman wine is strong, sour, and usually cut with water. Drink it straight, and people look at you like you're an uncivilized barbarian. Wine is flavored with honey, herbs, or even seawater to improve the taste. Amphoras line tavern walls, their clay rims sticky with drips. Cups are refilled endlessly, conversation loosening as the wine flows. The poor drink it thin and cheap. The rich sip finer vintages imported from Greece or Gaul. Either way, it fuels every gathering, greasing the wheels of gossip, politics, and bad decisions. Markets provide endless variety, if you can afford it. Spices from the East, dates from Arabia, oysters from distant coasts. Exotic foods are symbols of wealth, more about bragging rights than nutrition. You see figs so ripe they burst in your hand, cheese sharp enough to sting your tongue, honey poured golden and thick into clay jars. But you also see moldy bread, bruised fruit, and meat buzzing with flies, sold cheap to those with no better choice. Rome is a city of extremes, luxury piled high beside desperation. Street food is the great equalizer. Vendors sell sausages hot off the grill, chickpea pancakes crisp at the edges, nuts roasted until their scent drifts through the alleys. You bite into a sausage, grease dripping down your chin, and for a moment, you don't care if it's made of questionable scraps. It's hot, it's filling, it's joy on a stick. Children beg coins for honey cakes, their hands sticky, their faces glowing. Crowds gather around popine, tavern stalls, leaning on counters, slurping stews, dunking bread into bowls. It's noisy, messy, and delicious. You realize fast food isn't an American invention.
Rome was doing it 2 millennia earlier. But don't mistake abundance for comfort. Food safety is not a priority. Storage is unreliable, refrigeration non-existent. You bite into a fig and hope it's not fermenting from the inside. You drink wine and hope it wasn't watered with something worse than water. You chew bread and hope the stones don't crack a molar. And you thank the gods anyway, because hunger doesn't care about standards. Commerce is its own performance. The market is as much theater as trade. Vendors shout until their voices crack, advertising the freshness of their wares while swatting flies off them. Bargaining is expected. You never pay the first price. You argue loudly, wave your arms, make dramatic faces, until the seller sighs and knocks off a coin. Both of you know you are going to pay that amount anyway. It's less about money, more about the ritual. Everyone leaves pretending they've won. Shops line the streets, their counters open to passers-by. Bakers display loaves stacked high like pyramids. Butchers hang cuts of meat in windows, blood dripping into buckets. Cobblers show off sandals, their leather polished to hide the blisters they'll cause in a week. Perfume sellers crush herbs into oils that smell exotic, though you can't tell if they mask sweat or just add to it. Money changes hands constantly, coins clinking into purses, buyers inspecting each one to make sure it's not counterfeit. You feel the weight of your own pouch, painfully light, and wonder how many more days until you're forced to stretch beans into soup again. Dining is social theater too. In elite villas, meals are about showing off, not eating. Dishes arrive one after another. Dormice stuffed with nuts, peacock with feathers reattached for effect, exotic spices sprinkled just because they're expensive. Guests recline on couches, servants hover, musicians play softly in the background. You, lying sideways trying not to spill sauce down your tunic, realize the food is less about taste and more about status. People aren't praising the dishes, they're praising the host. The performance is as rich as the food. For ordinary Romans, dinner is simpler, but no less communal. Families huddle in small rooms, bowls of porridge or stew passed around, bread torn and shared. Conversation flows faster than food. Gossip about neighbors, complaints about landlords, jokes about politics. Children laugh, parents sigh, someone strums a lyre badly, and the room fills with warmth, not from luxury, but from togetherness. You chew slowly, savoring not the flavor, but the fact that you're not eating alone. And always, food carries risk. Spoiled meat, tainted wine, moldy grain. Illness is common, stomach cramps a familiar visitor. You clutch your belly at night and whisper a prayer to Asclepius, the god of healing, promising an offering if you survive until morning. The next day, you're back at the market, buying bread that tastes faintly of stone and wine that tastes faintly of vinegar, because the alternative is worse. In Rome, food and drink are more than sustenance. They are survival, status, spectacle, and sometimes salvation. A loaf of bread is politics. A cup of wine is friendship. A sausage in the street is joy. And you, sitting on a stool in a smoky tavern, bread in hand, wine on your tongue, noise all around you, realize that for all its flaws, this messy, chaotic, delicious empire has figured out one truth. Food is life, and life is meant to be shared, even if it gives you food poisoning.
Illness in Rome is not an if, it's a when. Living here means living with constant negotiation between your body and the invisible armies around you. The empire built aqueducts, roads, and monuments, but it did not invent soap that actually works, or doctors who understand germs. Every cough in the street is a warning. Every fever in your building a prophecy. Every cut on your foot a coin toss between healing and disaster. Start with the common cold. It travels through the insula faster than rumors. One neighbor sneezing, the next day half the building coughing like a chorus of broken trumpets. Remedies are simple. Warm water, garlic, maybe honey if you can afford it. You chew raw cloves until your breath alone could start wars, and you pray the gods prefer you healthy. Sometimes it passes, sometimes it lingers until you forget what breathing normally feels like. Stomach troubles are constant companions. Food spoils easily,
Water is not always clean, and garum, the fermented fish sauce Romans pour on everything, doesn't exactly encourage digestive peace. You wake at night, clutching your belly, swearing vengeance on the sausage you trusted earlier. A healer might prescribe wine mixed with herbs or charcoal, or simply shrug and tell you to rest. It's in the hands of the gods, they say, which, as ancient doctors speak for, good luck. Then there are fevers. They arrive suddenly, burning your skin while your teeth chatter from chills. Healers check your pulse, peer into your eyes, and begin a lecture about the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, they insist, depends on balance. If you're sick, something is out of balance. The solution? Bleeding, purging, or vomiting. Sometimes all three. You lie there weak, a bowl by your bed, wondering if the cure is worse than the disease. Wounds are another gamble. A small cut from chopping onions, a blister from your sandal, a scrape from falling on the cobbles, all of these can turn nasty. Infection creeps in quickly, redness spreading, pus forming, pain throbbing like a drum. There are salves made of honey, vinegar, or herbs, but effectiveness varies. Sometimes it heals, leaving only a scar. Other times it doesn't, and the healer brings out the knife, cutting away flesh with no anesthesia beyond a gulp of wine. You scream, bite down on a stick, and try not to pass out. Dental problems are infamous. Toothaches are common, teeth rot easily, and dentistry is less medicine than carpentry. When pain becomes unbearable, someone grabs pliers or a hooked instrument and yanks the tooth out by brute force. No numbing gel, no polite countdown, just pain, blood, and relief, if you're lucky. If the tooth breaks, infection follows. You sip watered wine afterward and swear never to smile again. Eyes suffer constantly. Smoke from lamps, dust from the streets, glare from the sun bouncing off stone walls. You rub them until they sting. Healers smear ointments made of herbs, honey, or even crushed insects. Some help, some make it worse. You learn to squint, blink often, and accept that half the city looks like it's perpetually irritated with you. And then there are the plagues. They sweep through the city like storms, sudden and merciless. One week the markets buzz with noise, the next, shutters are closed, temples overflow with desperate prayers, and carts rumble through the streets, carrying bodies. You smell the sickness before you see it, a sour, heavy odor that clings to everything. Friends vanish quickly. Neighbors whisper about omens, curses, angry gods. The lucky survive with scars, the unlucky vanish into mass graves. You huddle in your room clutching an amulet, whispering prayers you don't quite believe. In Rome, death is never far, but during plague it sits at your table. Mental health? Not a phrase anyone would recognize. Anxiety is explained as bad humors. Depression is blamed on lazy spirits or divine punishment. You're expected to endure, to keep working, to keep showing up. You might drink more wine, visit a temple, or wear a charm, but nobody listens when you say you're simply tired of living. Rome doesn't have patience for invisible suffering, and yet Romans adapt. Herbal remedies circulate: willow bark for pain, mint for digestion, fennel for eyes. Midwives pass down knowledge about childbirth, though the risks remain terrifyingly high. Old women whisper charms. Young men recite prayers. Healers mix concoctions that sometimes help and sometimes don't. You cling to whatever hope you can find, because hope, even false, feels like medicine. Superstition weaves itself into healing. Amulets shaped like phalluses ward off the evil eye. Charms etched on lead tablets promise protection. You tie ribbons to trees, burn incense, sprinkle salt, because maybe, just maybe, the gods are listening. And if they aren't, at least you're doing something. Helplessness feels worse than illness. You begin to notice how fragile life is here. Children cough and don't recover. Women die in childbirth far too often.
Soldiers return from campaigns, limping, scarred, missing limbs. Even the wealthy, with their better food and private doctors, cannot escape sickness. You see senators with gout, matrons with tumors, emperors felled by fevers no amount of sacrifice could prevent. Disease is the great equalizer in Rome. Status may buy comfort, but it doesn't buy immunity. Night is the hardest. Fever dreams blur with the sounds of the city, dogs barking, neighbors muttering, carts rattling over stone. You wake drenched in sweat, unsure if you survived the night or just bought another day. You grope for your amulet, whisper a prayer to Aeschylus, and tell yourself you'll be stronger tomorrow. Rome demands endurance, even from the sick, especially from the sick. In your own time, a pill, an antibiotic, a vaccine would fix so much of this. Here you have garlic, honey, prayers, and luck. And so you swallow the bitterness of herbs, endure the sting of vinegar on wounds, clutch charms until your palm aches, and keep breathing. Because in Rome, survival is less about science and more about sheer stubbornness. Step outside the city and Rome changes costume. Gone are the shouting vendors, the taverns spilling wine into the street, the endless symphony of carts, dogs, and arguments. Instead, you find yourself in the countryside, where life is quieter, slower, and yet in many ways harsher. If the city is chaos compressed, the countryside is labor stretched across endless fields. The first thing you notice is space. Fields roll out like blankets patched in green and gold, dotted with olive trees and vineyards. From a distance, it almost looks peaceful, like a painting. Up close, you see bent backs, blistered hands, sweat glistening on foreheads. Farmers rise before dawn, not because they're ambitious, but because the sun doesn't care about ambition. Work starts when light appears, and it doesn't stop until darkness makes tools invisible. Wheat is the empire's obsession. Fields of grain sway in the breeze, the lifeblood of the city's bread. You join in the harvest, scythe in hand, swinging again and again until your shoulders scream. The stalks scratch your arms, dust clogs your throat, sweat drips into your eyes. Baskets fill, then carts, then storage pits. Each one a reminder that Rome eats more than it praises. The city depends on these fields, but out here, no one is thinking about politics or marble monuments. They're thinking about finishing the row before their back breaks. Olives are another treasure. You climb ladders into gnarled trees, twisting fruit from branches, dropping them into baskets. The oil presses wait nearby, great stone wheels turned by donkeys, grinding olives into paste. The smell is sharp, fruity, sticky. Oil flows thick and golden, poured into amphorae and will travel back to the city for lamps, cooking, and rituals. You wipe your hands on your tunic, leaving stains that will never fade. Out here, clothing is just another rag in service of labor. Vineyards offer their own rhythm. Grapes hang heavy in clusters, sweet with promise. You pluck them, crush them, stomp them barefoot in vats until your legs are stained purple. The juice splashes up, sticky on your skin, the smell intoxicating even before fermentation. Wine will be the empire's bloodstream, carried to taverns, temples, and dinner parties. But for you, the stomping is just more work, another way the countryside stains your body as much as your clothes. Animals mark the rhythm of rural life. Sheep dot hillsides, their bleats carrying on the wind. Goats wander rocky slopes, chewing everything, staring at you with judgmental eyes. Cattle plod in circles, pulling plows through soil that resists like an old argument. Pigs squeal in pens, chickens dart underfoot, dogs bark at everything. The smells are overwhelming. Dung, hay, sweat, milk, dust. You breathe it in because there's no alternative. Out here, nature doesn't apologize. Rural homes are simpler than the city's insulae. Mud brick walls, thatched roofs, small windows. Inside, the air is thick with smoke from a central hearth, where meals are cooked in pots hanging over the fire. Beds are wooden frames with straw, not much better than what you had in the city, though here the drafts are stronger. At night, the countryside is darker, quieter, but also lonelier. No tavern noise, no gossip spilling through walls, just the distant howl of wolves and the whisper of wind through fields. Social life in the countryside revolves around survival. Families work together, children laboring alongside parents. Neighbors gather for harvest festivals, sharing bread, cheese, and wine, singing songs that carry across the fields. It's simpler, less theatrical than the city's spectacles, but not without joy. Laughter comes easily after a long day when the work is done and the food, however humble, is hot and filling. But rural life is also precarious. A bad harvest means hunger. A storm can flatten crops in an afternoon. Drought leaves fields cracked, animals gaunt, people desperate. Taxes still come due, whether grain grew or not. Collectors arrive with soldiers demanding payment in coin or kind. You watch a farmer hand over his last amphora of oil, his jaw clenched, knowing his family will eat less this winter. Rome always takes its share, even when nature already claimed too much. Slavery shapes the countryside as well. Wealthy estates, the latifundia, spread across acres, worked by gangs of slaves under overseers' whips. You hear their chants as they march into fields, their songs sharp with rhythm, heavy with sorrow. Escape is nearly impossible. Punishment for rebellion unimaginably brutal. The wealth of the city, the banquets, the spectacles, they all rest on the bent backs of those who have no choice. Out here, the cruelty is less public than in the amphitheater, but no less constant. Religion follows the seasons. Farmers offer the first fruits to Ceres, goddess of grain, praying for fertile fields. Small shrines dot the countryside, decorated with ribbons, garlands, and crude figurines. Sacrifices are made, a chicken, a lamb, sometimes a pig, its blood mixing with soil. You join the prayers, not because you believe more now than you did in the city, but because it feels reckless not to. Out here, the gods seem closer. When rain doesn't fall, when crops wither, you need someone to blame or beg. Yet the countryside also holds moments of peace the city cannot offer. You pause during work, wipe sweat from your brow, and look at the horizon. Hills roll into distance, birds wheel above, the wind rustles through wheat like whispered applause. For a fleeting moment, it is beautiful. The chaos of Rome feels far away, the shouting, the punishments, the crowded streets. Here, it's just you, the earth, and the endless cycle of labor. It's harsh, exhausting, sometimes cruel, but it's honest. Night in the countryside is deep. Stars prick the sky with clarity lost to city smoke. The moon spills silver across fields, lighting paths too narrow for carts. Crickets sing, owls call, wolves prowl at the edges of villages. You sit by the fire, stew bubbling in a pot, bread warming on a stone, and you think, maybe this is better. Fewer distractions, fewer dangers, fewer crowds, and then you remember the taxes, the back-breaking labor, the looming threat of famine, and you laugh bitterly. There is no escape. Rome owns the countryside as much as it owns the city. Still, as you stretch out on straw, the quiet hum of the fields lulling you, you admit there is something comforting in this rhythm. The city may overwhelm with noise, but the countryside overwhelms with silence. Both crush you in their own ways. Both demand your endurance. Both are Rome.
Rome is a city of gods, but also of ghosts, omens, curses, and the kind of superstitions that make you hesitate before stepping out the door. You might think religion means temples and priests, incense and sacrifices. But for ordinary Romans, it's woven into every gesture, every sneeze, every unlucky bird flying in the wrong direction. The official pantheon, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, may rule the marble temples, but daily life belongs to whispers, charms, and fears. Start at home.
Every household keeps a lararium, a small shrine tucked into a corner, decorated with little statues of the lares and penates, the spirits of ancestors and the protectors of the pantry. Each morning, you greet them with a crumb of bread, a splash of wine, maybe a pinch of incense if you're feeling generous. Ignore them, and you risk bad luck. Bread burning, pots cracking, milk souring. You've never believed in kitchen spirits before, but when your neighbor forgets his offerings and suddenly loses 3 chickens to foxes, you decide it's not worth testing. Step outside, and the city is full of omens. A sneeze before a journey? Postpone it. A black dog crosses your path? Unlucky. A raven calls from the wrong side? Rethink your plans. Even politicians consult augurs, priests who interpret the will of the gods by watching birds. You see a man standing on a hill, staring at the sky with unnerving seriousness, while the crowd waits for him to declare whether the gods favored today's business. Decisions about war, law, even elections hinge on whether a pigeon landed left or right. You laugh, but only quietly, because in Rome, laughter at omens is itself unlucky. Superstition fills the markets too. Amulets dangle from stalls, phalluses carved from bronze, bells shaped like fists, beads strung together with red thread. The logic is simple. Ward off the evil eye. Stare too long at someone's child, admire their new tunic without the right compliment, and you might be accused of cursing them. Better to hang charms, wear talismans, and mumbled protective phrases just in case. You buy a small bronze phallus, ridiculous and crude, but tie it around your neck. You feel silly, but also slightly safer. Rome makes you do strange things. Magic is everywhere, hidden but not invisible. In taverns, whispers circulate about women who brew love potions, about men who carve curses onto lead tablets and bury them under thresholds. You watch a scribe etching sharp little letters into thin sheets, rolling them up, driving a nail through. The curse might call for a rival to lose money, for a neighbor to grow sick, for a lover to return. These tablets end up in wells, graves, or temples, anywhere the gods or spirits might notice. The idea is simple. If you can't win honestly, cheat with divine paperwork. And then there are the stories of witches. Not the broomstick kind, but women in the outskirts of the city who gather herbs at night, chanting to the moon. Some claim they can draw down the stars, others that they brew poison strong enough to kill an army. You don't know if it's true, but you hear enough tales of men falling mysteriously ill, of women winning lovers against all odds to wonder. You consider visiting one, then remember how dangerous curiosity is in a world where suspicion spreads faster than plague. The dead loom large in daily life. Funerals march through the streets with music, mourners, and masks of ancestors carried high. Graves line the roads outside the city, each marked with inscriptions reminding the living to remember the dead. Romans fear restless spirits, so they leave offerings. Bread, milk, wine poured directly onto the earth. Forget to honor the dead, and they might return, whispering in dreams, rattling doors, souring milk. At night, walking past tombs, you swear you hear voices in the wind. You walk faster, muttering a prayer to spirits you don't even know by name. Festivals blur the line between religion and superstition. At Lemuria, households scatter black beans at midnight to appease the dead. At Saturnalia, roles reverse, chaos reigns, and you wear a silly hat to please a god who loves disorder. At Lupercalia, young men run through the streets half naked, whipping bystanders with strips of goat hide to promote fertility. You laugh nervously, but when someone slaps your arm with a bloody strip and declares you blessed, you decide maybe there's wisdom in absurdity. Fear of curses shapes behavior. If someone falls ill suddenly, people whisper about rivals hiring magicians. If crops fail, neighbors eye each other suspiciously. A strange symbol chalked on a doorframe can spark panic. To counter it,
You hang garlic, sprinkle salt, or call in a priest to perform cleansing rituals. You even spit 3 times on the ground after praising someone to avoid attracting envy. Superstition is exhausting, but so is ignoring it. Even soldiers are not immune. Before battles, augurs read entrails, slicing open animals to examine livers, hearts, and intestines. A blemish in the wrong place, and the entire campaign pauses. You picture generals, hardened by war, waiting nervously while a priest pokes around inside a sheep. It would be funny if the stakes weren't so high. When the augur declares the omens favorable, cheers erupt, and men march off to fight with the confidence that at least the sheep is on their side. For you, a stranger from another time, it all feels overwhelming. You've never knocked on wood, crossed your fingers, and whispered a prayer quite this often. Yet the longer you live in Rome, the more it seeps into you. You carry your amulet, touch the shrine in your home, watch birds a little too carefully. Rational or not, these rituals give structure to a chaotic world. They make you feel less helpless in a city where illness, violence, and fate strike without warning. At night, as you blow out your lamp, you whisper a short prayer to the Lares, clutch your charm, and listen to the silence between noises. The darkness feels heavier here, thick with unseen eyes. You wonder if the gods are listening or if they're just amused. Either way, you mutter your thanks and roll over, because in Rome, superstition isn't just belief, it's survival.
You might think, by now, you've seen everything Rome has to offer. You've endured the straw bed, the scratchy wool, the garum-soaked meals, the endless gossip at the fountain, the gladiators and the augurs, the smell of smoke and sweat in every corner. Surely, you tell yourself, there can't be more surprises. And yet, Rome always finds a way to prove you wrong. Evening stretches longer, the air cooling just enough to trick you into thinking comfort exists. People gather in courtyards, on steps, in taverns, talking with the ease of those who know tomorrow will be just as chaotic as today. You sit on a worn stool, bread in one hand, a chipped cup of wine in the other, listening as neighbors swap stories. Some are dull. Grain prices, taxes, someone's donkey refusing to move. Others are wild. Omens spotted in the sky, rumors of the emperor's latest scandal, whispers about a new cult from the east. Rome thrives on rumor the way fields thrive on rain. You sip, nod, pretend to follow, and wonder how many of these stories are true. Probably none. Probably all. The city itself seems to shift as the night deepens. Torches flicker on walls, shadows lengthen, alleyways grow darker. You walk carefully, sandals slapping stone, ears straining for any sound that might mean danger. Every corner feels like a stage curtain about to reveal something unexpected. A drunk staggering home, a thief watching from the shadows, a couple whispering too loudly about someone else's wife. Rome at night is a theater of possibilities, most of them inconvenient. You stop at a tavern, lured by the smell of hot stew and the promise of company. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and laughter. Dice clatter across a table, curses follow when coins change hands. A bard plucks a lyre, singing a song that sounds suspiciously improvised, rhyming wine with fine more times than necessary. People cheer anyway. You sit, eat, drink, and realize that in Rome, the quality of entertainment matters less than the fact that it's happening. Noise itself is comfort. But beneath the laughter, there's always tension. A soldier in the corner sits too stiffly, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. A merchant brags too loudly about profits, earning glares from men who can barely afford bread. A drunk stumbles into another man. Apologies turn to insults, insults to fists. For a moment, you think it'll end in knives, but then someone makes a joke, the crowd laughs, and the fight dissolves into another round of drinks. In Rome, conflict never vanishes, it just changes costume. You step outside again, belly warm with food and wine, the street quieter now. The moon hangs above the rooftops, pale and distant, while stars prick the sky in patterns you don't recognize. You breathe in, the air cooler, cleaner, as if the city itself has decided to give you a moment of peace. And then a shout breaks it. Always a shout. Someone chasing a thief, someone calling for a lost child, someone arguing with the night itself. Rome never truly sleeps. It only changes its script. You find yourself walking past the Forum, its columns looming like giant teeth in the dark. By day it buzzes with voices, but at night it feels haunted, empty, yet not silent. You imagine all the decisions made here, all the arguments shouted, all the lives changed by words carved into stone. You run your hand along a pillar, the marble cold, and wonder how many others did the same. Senators, slaves, strangers like you, all touching the same stone, all leaving nothing behind but whispers. Closer to the amphitheater, you hear echoes. Not real, not tonight. It's closed, silent, the sand swept clean. But your mind fills the silence with ghosts. The roar of a crowd, the clash of swords, the cries of animals dragged from cages. You picture it too vividly, shiver, and walk faster. Rome is full of ghosts, and they don't need night to be felt. And then there's the river. The Tiber flows dark and steady, carrying secrets through the city. You stand on the bank, the water glinting under moonlight, the smell of silt and rot filling your nose. Barges drift quietly, shadows moving across the current. Somewhere downstream, waste and offerings mingle, proof that Rome doesn't separate the sacred from the disgusting. You toss a pebble in, watch the ripples spread, and imagine your worries floating away. They don't, of course. They sink. Everything sinks here, eventually. Back in your insula, you climb the creaking stairs, passing doors cracked open, light spilling into the hall. You hear lullabies, arguments, prayers, snores, life compressed into thin walls, each family a note in Rome's endless song. You reach your door, push it open, and step inside. The air is heavy, the straw bed waiting, the lamp guttering. You sit, rub your feet, sigh. Tomorrow will come too quickly. You'll wake to carts rattling, neighbors shouting, bread hard as stone, wine thin as water. You'll work, sweat, laugh, complain, bargain, pray. Rome will swallow you whole and spit you out again. But yet, tonight feels different, like the city is holding its breath, waiting. You don't know for what. You only know that the air feels thicker, the silence heavier, the shadows longer. You lie down, the straw scratching your back, the blanket itching your skin. You stare at the ceiling, cracked and stained, and listen to the city outside, still murmuring, to your heart still beating, to something else, quieter, harder to name. You close your eyes, telling yourself it's nothing. But in Rome, nothing is never just nothing.